Welcome to the CTO Studio. This week is our agency episode. If you are considering building software for other people, putting together your own dev team, we talked to the amazing Ryan Weiss, who is doing this very successfully. And if you are his competition, he's probably going to blog about you. So do it.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Ryan Weiss?
That's right.
Welcome. Have you watched any of these episodes?
Yeah, I have.
And how does it now feel to be on this side?
Pretty cool. I like it.
Cool.
Glad to be invited.
All the time. So Austin tech scene.
Yep.
So when did you move to Austin?
My wife and I moved about 8 or 9 years ago.
From where?
Houston, Texas.
Houston.
Right.
Did Houston have a problem?
Yeah. There was a lot of problems. Apart from just not having a great lifestyle for families, the tech culture there, no offense to people from Houston, but I didn't find it was focused on craft.
More like service providing, and
it was more of a commodity market where they didn't really care about how good, like there was no differentiation between this guy's really good and this guy's not so good. So you really could only shine with politics, and I didn't find that to be terribly interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean politics like workplace politics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a decision early on in life as a member of corporate South Africa, Germany, and America to not go to happy hours.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Because I felt like that was where the politics happened. The politicking happened.
Yeah. I had a guy in Houston passively accuse me of being gay because I mentioned that we went to a quilt exhibit at a museum at like a company happy hour.
Wow.
And it was like in a negative kind of way. And I'm just like,
this
is wrong at so many levels. Check, please.
So have you ever used DuckDuckGo?
No.
Okay. Well, that was what my interview was going to be about. So I hate how Google tracks everything we do, man.
Right.
So I'm really going to give DuckDuckGo a try.
Okay.
Cool. So you're in San Diego. By the time this is, you would have given an amazing talk
Right.
at O111.
Yeah, let's hope.
And it's your second time.
Yep.
You're one of the very few people who are doing this a second time around.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So your passion and is very much obviously dev, and you're the founder of Ryan Weiss Software, right?
No, Ryan, just Vice Software.
Vice Software.
That's
so,
right.
So you're fully immersed in the world of scoping projects, deving projects, giving founders and companies and corporates what they want through software development projects.
That's pretty much exactly it. Basically, the way our company works is there's no one who works at the company who doesn't program. And it's a blended model. So I basically got to a point in enterprise software where I got very competitive with my rate and started managing offshore teams. And so basically ended up not enjoying that so much for a while until I met my partner. And then once we met, we realized that we could actually create a lot of value. And I understood why the large companies were paying me to try and get that model to work. And we decided we should go try to sell it to small and mid companies. And so now we've taken on a few projects for folks where we're going CTO down. I'm just finalizing a deal right now with a company that's creating a marketing research type platform. And I'll probably be stepping into a fractional CTO type role there. And then, pardon me, my partner Prashanth, who lives in New Delhi, manages the team and the operations. And basically, I also handle making sure that our technology vision is correct and that we have that we're strategically set for the right technologies at the right time. And so I've gotten pretty lucky in the last few.
Yeah, it's crazy how important timing is.
Mm-hmm.
Companies wanting to spend time on certain things that they should really defer for a couple months or years.
Right. And we found that like being knowing things that not a lot of people know and being cheaper than most folks helps us sell a little easier. We're trying to kind of work on our marketing and things like that so that it doesn't have to be just like we're cheap and good and we'll work super hard, and it's more like people just want to use us. But so far our model has been we know the new stuff and we do it for a good price.
Yeah, and so so let's kind of talk about sort of the agency software development model, because I think it's incredibly valuable not only for people running those shops,
Right.
but CTOs who are considering hiring those shops.
Right.
You're saying that you've taken some lessons learned in what worked for you in the enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and you're making that available to startups and tech projects, on a smaller scale.
Right.
What can you tell me? Like, what are some of those things?
Right. So basically, like everybody's looking at $10 an hour, $15 an hour labor offshore, and I mean it should be very tempting, but not a lot of people do it because it's really hard to be successful with it. But what I found is every single large company that contracted me would almost immediately put me in charge of an offshore team. And like I said, it was a head scratcher for a while. I was just like, give me one US guy for every 4 guys and I can make it work or whatever. But I realized over time that the reason they do that is if you have a guy like me long enough and try enough teams, you can get into a situation where there's a lot of value. But the setup cost is so high that it's not really accessible to small businesses unless they really invest in it. I have a buddy who, pardon me, he also has a consulting company and he contracts us and he's fully capable of hiring and managing developers, but he's been contracting us probably a little longer than he wants to, just because it's hard to make it work, even if you know how to do software. And the key aspect is having the right physical partnership. So me and my partner Prashant, like we're practically family at this point. We have a very much like a lot of our agreements are handshake type agreements, but there's tons of integrity there, and it just makes everything work. Because he gets great results from the team. And then I'm able to, being immersed in Austin and in the tech progressive culture there, I'm able to pick up on what the trends are. I go to the meetups, meet folks, and make sure that we're training up on the right stack.
So are you saying that, to bring it back to the enterprise versus small, every time you got hired initially, you would be put in charge of a remote team?
Right.
And that you're just saying that you've now converted that into you managing your own teams with Prasant.
Right.
And leveraging that now, lessons learned, optimal process, software delivery milestones, and you've just made it more efficient then so that smaller companies can use your service.
Right. Well, the real difficulty getting into it is the startup cost. So on projects, my clients, they don't need my time 40 hours a week. I've got one arrangement right now with a rather large company in Austin. It's 10 hours a week for my time. I've got another company that I'm going to sign an agreement with probably for 5 hours a week of my time. The larger companies are paying 40 hours a week for long periods of time to have a guy like me who bills pretty high try and find a team that works, and then you fail with numerous teams before you finally find that right match. So just the startup cost goes really high on having a high billing guy testing out different teams. And so I find that startups and mid-sized companies, they can't really afford it,
So how large is your team in India?
We've got 12 right now.
Okay. And so how do you walk someone through? So let's get sort of into estimates and budgets.
Sure.
And taking the ideas and the spec and bringing it into real life. How do you walk a CEO founder through that process in a way that builds trust?
Right. So we've gotten really good at estimating MVPs. And so that's something that if you really, in my opinion, it's all about doing a waterfall style approach to your estimation. So you pretty much have to make sure that you create a spec that accounts for most things, and you just call out all your users, what the different experience is for each user, walk through that, make sure it seems pretty solid. And then my partner and I have gotten to where we're very quick at estimating on top of that. And then I have an article on my website about it. Basically, we account for a known unknowns. So we have a padding bucket for the fact we're estimating in ideal hours. We have a padding bucket for requirements, wiggle room. And then we have a padding bucket for QA. And then we run everything super lean. So basically, we prefer Kanban because we know our guys work hard. We don't need to motivate them with Agile. And so basically, we prioritize the backlog, and then we just charge through the items, and then we do weekly demos to show progress. And so your visibility becomes much cheaper. And then if you cut out all the overhead of Scrum for an MVP, you save a lot of money. I mean, you won't even have time to figure out what your velocity is. And if you're doing all those extra meetings and everything, it's just expensive. So we end up with like 7.5 hours per week for project management, which is pretty low. And for MVPs, it works great. But I talked to some of the other CTOs and 7 CTOs, like Dwayne and folks like that, and they're having a hard time estimating, but it's an entirely different beast because they're in the middle of this long continuous stream of development, and they're having deadlines and goals pushed to them and having to try and get to that. And that's a much harder nut to crack. And so,
what recommendation do you have for CTOs in that situation where somehow the market is artificially forcing deadlines down on them? Like what would you advise those people?
Sure. I mean, so don't burn out your team, but I'm sure that happens a lot. But really, you can play with scope is your main thing. So you need to prioritize your features and go for the highest priority ones first, and make sure that your must-haves fit well within a reasonable estimate, and then have your optionals layered on top. If you just set the deadline ahead of time and the feature set is static, most likely it's just going to be a lot of drama and dysfunction.
And I think a lot of I think a lot of it is probably around ownership as well, where as CTOs you should be pushing back and fighting for more reasonable deadlines. Right,
and that can be a tough challenge depending on what the relationship is with your CEO. I know I've seen some chatter around that on the 7 CTOs board, and sometimes the expectations are unrealistic and you can't hit them. We have a slightly advantageous position because sometimes we will just not take contracts because we don't feel like we're set for success, and we just don't have the staff or we just can't handle when things go bad. It takes up too much time. So if it seems like the project's not going to be successful, if we can't make it successful, we'd rather just pass. I mean, because you'll end up breaking even anyway. And you could be doing useful things like business dev or, those kind of things with that time.
So you mentioned sort of Sandler's model, right? Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you use that a lot when you are talking to prospective clients, right?
Yeah, not just clients. Probably.
Can you walk us through sort of that model just for the...
Sure. So Sandlers was a training class I took when I first started getting involved with one of the more service-oriented consultancies out of Austin called Headspring. And they make everyone there take Sandler. And basically, at that time, technically, I had risen up pretty hard and gotten to where I felt very confident technically. But my challenges, which I didn't realize until I took the course, were really around communication and things like that. I just kind of assumed that I don't mind being wrong, and I just assumed everyone doesn't mind being wrong. And that kind of rubbed some people the wrong way, as obviously you would expect. But the Sandler model just teaches you, when I tell my wife about it, it's all obvious to her. So maybe I was just an asshole. I don't know. But it wasn't as obvious to me, some of these things. But it just teaches you things like, if someone's upset, you'll never make them happier without you being more upset. They call that okay, not okay. So if they're not okay, you have to be more not okay to kind of push them in the right direction. And there's things about with your email communication, you should only require that someone has to read 1 to 2 lines max. And if there's anything beyond that, you just kind of say details below, let's have a call, whatever. There's this concept of upfront contract. So when you're talking to folks, you always kind of let them know, these are the things we're going to talk about. And then like before you get done, you say, these are the follow-up steps, just kind of letting people know where everything's at. And it all seems like super obvious to me now.
I mean, I don't feel like it's obvious, but again, I'm also an engineer, so
yeah. I just I felt like, it's like Star Trek and we're all Vulcans, and and you could just say that's a horrible idea.
So let's riff on the okay, not okay thing.
Yeah.
So just break it down for me.
It basically just means be empathetic, like care. Yeah.
So for instance, if someone is not okay with something, I'm not going to fix it by being okay with it.
No.
I'm going to fix it by being more not okay.
Right.
Oh.
Like you don't go, oh, my bad. You're like, oh my God, I'm so bad to tell you this. I feel so bad. This is so embarrassing for me. And then you kind of lead into it like that. And then you can get them to where they're like, it's okay, man.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just like, oh, whatever, man, my bad. It's like shit happens.
I think that this happens a lot with when something breaks, let's say a production build or a feature breaks. I find that the CEO, in some such setups, the CEO then contacts the CTO and is upset.
Right.
And the CEO invariably communicates some assumptions that they had, where as an analytical person, I'm like, I never said that. I didn't know about that. I didn't realize you were going to do this weekend.
Sure.
The CEO in their head's like, no, of course we spoke about it and blah, blah, blah. And so I find that my initial first reaction is always wanting to explain how I wasn't on the same page with the CEO. And every time I do that, it backfires. Like every time. Every time I try and explain myself, it just doesn't work. Because I'm requiring now for my CEO to have empathy, right?
Right.
So I'm requiring them to say, "Oh, okay, I didn't realize that you weren't in that meeting.
Right.
Okay, don't worry, everything's cool." No, we still have the problem, and they're still upset. And but what I have found is that, and this takes a lot of work, is to also not be okay. It's almost like I've got to come around and sit with the CEO and point at at me, and be like, that should never have happened in the first place.
Right. You got to be upset about it. You got to care about what he cares about, or he's just going to be mad or upset or whatever. Yeah. And so that wasn't terribly obvious to me before I took the Sandler piece, and so for me, once I felt like I got to a point where where the technical where I was technically competent and able to deliver, I realized that architecture is only valuable if people actually believe in it and do it. You can try and enforce it, but really you have to go into a team, be able to evangelize things, and it's very important that people like you, and that the communication really helps with that. I had another client tell me one time that his number one thing he tries to do on every job is to get every single person to like him, and that it's so hard to do. And there's certain people who it just never happens with. But he says he tries it so hard, and that kind of really resonated with me. And ever since then, I do that on projects too. I just try to, and it's just honestly, it just feels like something you should be doing anyway. Yeah. But it's tremendously helpful in a service industry.
Whatever you did has worked on me.
That was ribs.
Yeah, it's a very tough relationship, I think, when software is being developed and you're either going off target or you're not delivering according to the expectation, or you've delivered and then something breaks.
Right. And a lot of times too, like from our worldview, pardon me, I always say we win or lose on the estimate. And with CEO, it might be the same thing, where I find it's much easier to kind of fight your battles before you've agreed to something. You have more leverage at that point. Yeah, and you're still kind of negotiating before there's been a commitment, and you can say, "Oh, I don't know if we can make that. I think we need a little bit more time for that. There's some unknowns here. Oh, we definitely need to assume that this is going to work a certain way for this to work out right." And you kind of make sure you write everything down. That was a challenge I'm having with one of my new clients, that we're kind of just getting our partnership going. and we're very rushed into it, like because he had some aggressive needs. And now I'm kind of trying to back us off and be like, okay, let's get a little process around this. If you need something from me that has to happen, make sure there's an email or something like that, so that we don't have to get into these. Well, I told you about that 3 days. I mean, I can't remember this morning, you know.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And so are you hunting down accounts receivable as well?
Yes.
And so who do you send to your clients if they don't pay?
So we do everything. So everything's around process, because anytime we're collecting money or reviewing contracts, we're not billing. And so we basically offer huge incentives for people to pay on time. So every time you pay a contract on time with us, we give you about I guess it'd be about a 25% discount that you can apply to the next invoice. Like those hours, it rolls forward. And then on the last one, you can fold it in. And then that keeps it to where most people will pay on time, because there's that big money incentive and we don't have to spend as much time on it. And then honestly, like we collect deposits that cover our spread, and we just have to be diligent about not letting people go too far over that. And then you don't have to spend that much time on accounts receivable. You just basically, like the electric company, turn off the services if it's beyond what you want to basically extend someone on credit.
And so are most of your customers lifelong customers because of maintenance agreements and hosting, or do you basically like to hand it off and walk away?
It goes a few different ways. Some people we've had longer term relationships with. Other folks will do MVPs for, and it just doesn't work out for them. Like their business doesn't take off, so there's nothing else to do there. And then sometimes people just pull us in. A lot of times we get pulled in for expertise they don't have in-house, like their mobile apps and things like that. And once the mobile app gets done, we won't hear from them for a while. We try to avoid staff hog work, and mainly because, like I said, with our low overhead approach, staff hog brings a lot of overhead with it. And when people are upset about things, it's not as easy to kind of correct it. You know, if you have a spec and you have a contract that agrees on a scope of work and things like that, it's very easy to say, well, we did it or we didn't do it. Whereas if someone's just upset because Frank has been working slow, I mean, it's much harder to deal with that. We haven't really taken that on, and it's as long as we can continue to do more project and statement of work based stuff, we probably focus on that just because it's much easier to succeed.
Do you feel like it's your responsibility to tell a founder or CEO that their MVP sucks? Well, and let me rephrase that. When you have a strong feeling that what they think is going to work isn't going to work,
right? Or
they think it's just the tech and they haven't thought it through the business model.
Sure.
Do you feel like that CTO responsibility to then push back, or at that point are you just a vendor who's providing software?
No, we definitely want people to be successful. If they do well, then we will have more opportunities too. And I definitely will try and push back on things respectfully. But at a certain point, you kind of are like, all right, I've warned you 2 or 3 times that I think this is not a great idea. If that's what you want, we'll be happy to go that direction with it. A lot of times it's more around where we really change kind of people's directions is asking them if they need stuff. It's like, are you sure you need that? You know, like really pulling out scope is kind of what we probably do more of than anything.
Isn't it hard though to be true to that when you know you can build in margin and cash some checks?
No, because our philosophy on it is that people have a budget, and if we do really well for them, they're going to continue to give us out of that budget. You know, they have a certain budget that they can spend, and, you know, say they have $100,000 budget and you give them a contract that's half their budget and it takes less time than they thought, and you get there, then they still have another 50,000. They probably have a lot of other things they want to build, and they'll come back to you. You know?
One of the something that someone suggested to me who also runs a successful dev agency is that the first question you should ask people is, what is the budget?
Right.
And the second question you should ask is, have they thought through the revenue mechanics?
Right.
For this project?
Yeah. Are you going to make money?
Are you going to make money? Is that a pretty common thing?
I never lead with, I've never I've never been in a position where I felt comfortable just asking someone what their budget is.
It feels disingenuous, right? Like, hey, so I mean, on my end, if I am scoping out a project,
right.
all I'm doing is figuring out, hey, are we going to be able to work together or not?
Right.
It's really just a qualifying question.
Yep.
It's definitely not well, let's make sure we quote within 80% of their budget.
Right. So what we do is, if I talk to someone for 30 minutes, I can give them an estimate that's a little bigger than what they need for us to do the project. And so I'll let them know, like, basically what we do is we kind of swag around 40 hours per screen. So I figure out how many screens are in the app. We have a spreadsheet, we stick that in, and then we can quickly go, okay, this looks like it'll be 3 months and X number of dollars. Or less, most likely less. And the more time you spend with us, the more we can get that number down to where it's at. And that kind of helps us quickly kind of get to where they were like, oh, I thought this was going to be $1,500. And you're like, this is like Excel, you know? I mean, this is 6 months of software development.
Do you have some recommendations for CTO types or tech types who want to start dev shop agencies? Do you?
Oof.
Don't do it.
Have a long talk with your wife.
Yeah, because you're pretty hands-on with the coding, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think the problem with it is, I think people are really good at their job. You know, they'll be really good. I'm a great programmer. And they'll go out there and try and bid on a project, and they won't realize that there's like a skill set involved, a ton of skill sets. Like, you might be a great coder, but maybe you're not good at DevOps. You might not be good at support. You're going to have to basically get good at everything. So I guess the easiest way to get going would be to start like freelancing and kind of building your way up and kind of establish some relationships with some vendors who you could trust, where if you needed to scale up, you could scale up. But it's really challenging. And the thing is, the sales cycle is very time consuming, and it's generally during your 9 to 5. So it can be a hard thing. I would say try and come up with a product idea.
Well, this is so these are my 2 comments. So this is our agency episode. So there are 2 comments I have on that. One, I think that you can often think, well, I have cheap dev resources. I have my buddies in Ukraine who I utilized when I was with company X.
Right.
So now I'm seeing it as an opportunity to leverage them, mark it up, and build stuff.
Right.
That to me sounds like a horrible idea, because for the reasons you mentioned, which is you kind of have to care about what you're building, and it's going to require so much of you. And so the second challenge is the fact that, and maybe you're doing this, but I want to build a product, so I'm going to fund it by agency work.
Right.
And actually, we had Andy Ballister on here, co-founder of GoFundMe.
Oh, wow.
And he mentioned that the way they survived the early days was to take on agency work.
I'm glad that works sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, it never works. I mean, I've never heard of it working.
Yeah.
But I also know that we have another CTO, Bill View, with Casual Fridays, and they're full on marketing agency, but they've incubated this Instagram style product that seems to be taking off. So, but that to me is the extreme. I mean, I don't hear about that. Are you guys building products at all? Surely you're tempted to build products,
right? Like, I think every person on the service side is like, what product can we build? Because the service, it's so hard to feed the beast and keep everything going in the constant sales cycle, and like, oh, this is great. Oh, wow, we're about to go out of business. Cycle gets a little old after a while. And I have a buddy who's been able to do that in the energy space with his company. Right now, we have a client that we're looking at taking on some equity positions for some marketing logistics software. And so I think it looks very positive that could happen. We're also playing around with some ideas in social like legalized gambling. So we've got some URLs and domains and stuff, and we're looking at some social betting type apps. So we're always looking for a product play, just because services is so hard to scale. But I feel fortunate to be in the position we are in with the services. We work with a lot of small business owners and mid-sized business owners. I get to have a lot of lunches with people who are super passionate about what they do and really good at what they do. And that aspect of it alone is makes for a really fun experience.
And I think the knowing sort of the direction that you want to go. So the one question I would think is, if you've run out of work for your dev team,
right?
Is that a good time to kind of have them work on your product idea, or is that like a problem because of cash flow?
Right. So we try to have a slush fund available that will carry us for a few months, and if you don't, pardon me, the first time you have a dip in sales, you're going to go out of business. So fortunately, we've been pretty frugal in that aspect, and but that is kind of what we were doing. We had a dip recently, and that's where we were starting to put some wind in the sails of this betting product idea. But then projects started picking back up, and that's one of the challenges with agency service type work is balancing business dev and product ideas with keeping your clients going. I mean, it looks like we're going to have, pardon me, 3 large contracts all start within a few weeks of each other, which is going to be kind of all hands on deck craziness. And so we'll be really focused on trying not to mess anything up. And during that time, we should also be really focusing on our marketing strategy and our biz dev and all that. But what ends up happening a lot of times is we fall behind on that stuff until things start going down, and then it's too late. So we're trying to learn from the past on this.
So as we wind down, I guess the one way to also optimize your machine is to pick your technology stacks, your sort of go-to technologies. I'm assuming that in most cases, especially if you're building MVPs or new-ish projects, that the client doesn't really care too much about which stack you pick, right?
It depends on the client you're going after. We prefer non-technical clients, and they don't care.
Okay.
They're much easier to work with. They just care about, does the software work, and did you deliver when you said you would, and they're much easier to satisfy. With your technical, pardon me, clients, they're going to care more. So what we've tried to do is pick technologies that strategically work for technical companies. Like we like Facebook's React, as everyone jokes about, and CTOs about me. And we like AWS and things like that. But on the business side, those technologies offer a lot of value too. So we're able to kind of market it to both sides. So you're trying to pick the trends on the tech side, but we pick the trends that convert to business sales pitches on the non-tech side. So we can say, like, if we use Facebook's React, and if you decide to do a mobile app, you can reuse 70% of your code. So there's a huge business value to it. You know,
is the reuse or the right ones deploy everywhere sort of, is that the true business value of React?
That, and that we have a smaller team, and we're able to do mobile and web, and then we do Node on the back end too. So everyone knows JavaScript, so they can write front end, back end, mobile code. You can have one smaller team do a lot more things. And the code reuse is definitely there. We haven't leveraged it as much as I thought we would. It seems like most of the time folks have their mobile app ready. I'm sorry, their web app ready, and they come to us because they want their mobile versions. But some of these newer projects we're doing, if they get wings, we'll definitely take advantage of it.
So help me just, if I wanted to start a React app, do I do that create React script?
We've based our boilerplate on create React app. I found that most of the React boilerplates and things out there don't have the practical nuts and bolts pieces that you need to really get started. So we wrote our own, and basically it includes like authentication and authorization and some forms and some validations. In my opinion, you spend a lot of time figuring that stuff out, and it's surprising to me that the community doesn't provide more of a kind of business focused, ready to go starting point, as opposed to hello world starting point, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Which I think Microsoft historically has always been really good about that. And my background was kind of in the Microsoft dev when I was doing enterprise work. And so I kind of took from there and was like, we need a starting point that lets you log in and have permissions and have validations.
And is that a Bootstrap script package that is sort of a competitive advantage for you? Like, you guys haven't open sourced that or anything? It's how...
No, it's open source.
Oh.
Yeah, it's open source. And I use it as a training aid. Like when we go on, what's helpful for it is that when we're telling people we can build this for you, a lot of times they'll want us to augment their team. And so we can say, look, we have this boilerplate we start with. It shows training resources at the bottom. Go look, watch these videos first. It calls out all the patterns we use and has references to it.
It's open sourced.
Yeah, it's open sourced, and it just creates a starting point. And then it also, if they say, well, how do we know you write good code? We say, well, take a look at our boilerplate. These are the patterns we believe in. This is what the style that the code will be. And then when we sign a contract, we can say, these are the types of patterns we're going to use. This is what the code's going to look like. So it disambiguates where we need to go. And in the beginning, honestly, it's just a learning tool. Like, you don't know a good way to architect things until you actually go out and figure these things out. You know,
I love that as a way to communicate the quality of your code.
Right.
Just finally, you mentioned a fun way to engage your competition.
I did.
You said something about they ask, you answer.
Oh, right.
So leave us with a nugget on how to deal with competition.
So I got to give a shout out to Casual Fridays on that, because they recommended I read that book. And I thought one of the more interesting things in there was basically they were saying you should blog favorably about your competitors. And so you say, like, it's a pool company, like the guy he's talking about, he builds custom pools. And he does an article every year that says top 5 pool companies, and he doesn't put himself on the list. And it's like, why would you do that? He's like, well, if they Google Joe Schmo's pools, who's your competitor, they end up on your website. And you know, even though you're saying that they're good, they're hearing about the fact that they're good from you. So you're still engaging with them. You know,
I actually know a guy who runs like the 2nd or 3rd largest pool company in the United States.
That's great.
You think it's him?
Maybe. I don't know. This guy's probably making more money on marketing now. But I've actually been having more fun learning about marketing these past 6 months or a year or so. I've kind of jumped into that in the same way I jumped into development back in the day, and I want to.
I've seen some of your videos.
Yeah.
Green screening, Eric.
Yeah.
I haven't reached that level.
Y'all could have constellations back here and like.
Well, Ryan, all the way from Austin, you are a super awesome person. Thanks for hanging with us. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. It's been super fun. I appreciate the invite. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Cheerios. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to the CTOstudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.